Chapter 4. And when they show up, bill them. To bill them, you will have to learn to charge people for what it is that you do or for whatever product you might supply them. Part of the dollar dance of life is going beyond the ego's emotional awkwardness about charging money. Somehow we tend to think that when we bill someone, they will not like us, or perhaps we are taking food from the mouths of babes. This harks back to our approval complexes, but it also has a lot to do with self confidence. One of the things you will have to look at is how you will concentrate and consolidate your energy so that you feel good about charging. How many times have you done an incredibly neat job for someone, really put your heart and soul into it? Normally, you would have charged, say, $100. But when asked how much was owed, you responded, no, no, have it for nothing. Or you said, well, normally I charge 100, but in this case, I'll take 10. We have all done it at some time or another. And whereas it's pleasurable and kind to do someone a favor, it is also important that the level of your commercial activity endorse you. And this comes from your charging a decent price. Otherwise, the energy you expend in just making ends meet robs you of your positivity. Eventually, that lack of positivity will put you down, and you will find that you do not even have the discount customers anymore. Many find it hard to charge for what they do, for the ego hesitates, feeling that people will react negatively. In fact, quite the reverse is the case. People like you to charge them more. It makes them feel important. How much buzz do you get out of spending 9 cents in Woolworths? But a $200 meal makes you feel special. You feel you are getting value. Further, the more you charge, the more people respect you. If you do things on the cheap, people tend to get down on you and find fault with what you do. Having gotten something for nothing, they begin to demand more. That's human nature. The other thing about charging is that often we tend to think that the world is experiencing the same lack that we are. This is a bad mistake. The fact that you might be potless does not mean the world is. You should not project your lack onto others. I noticed this particularly in Australia. If you go into a grocery store and buy one at the top of the line, the storekeeper tries to dissuade you from having it, or at very least, he warns you that you have picked the pricey item. It is as though he thinks you are going to electrocute yourself if you touch that particular can or brand of tea. Recently in Sydney, I was discussing this feature in the Australian psyche with a friend who told me about Twinings, which was considered the best tea and was much more expensive than the other brands. So the next time I was in the store, I picked up a couple packs of tea and placed them on the checkout counter. Sure enough, the owner of the store said, this is Twinings tea, it's very expensive. It costs $1 more. I answered, fantastic. No, he said, thinking that I had misheard him. Not $1 less, $1 more. Great, I exclaimed. By now, the storekeeper was really confused. He figured out that I was a foreign and at least not Australian. So he started repeating himself, talking loudly and slowly as if I were a deaf Eskimo who couldn't speak English. Picking up the tea, he held the boxes to his chest and pointed to the price tag. He gripped them as if they were priceless heirlooms handed down from time immemorial. I leaned over and peered at the offending price tag and said, I understand now. The storekeeper beamed a smile of delight, happy that he had saved me from the grisly fate of paying $1 more. But while he was still clutching the boxes to his chest, I turned around and lazily scanned the shelves of the shop. Then, turning ever so slowly back to the face of the owner, I smiled and said, I'll take 60 boxes. He didn't believe me, so I wound up just taking the two I had originally selected, and I trotted off to ponder the ups and downs of the world tea market. Again, you see that the inability to charge properly comes from the common emotional conflicts people have about money. Many feel that if they charge for service or item, they are somehow taking something away from the buyer, that in their charging, the buyer's safety or survival is threatened. In some way, this is pure TikTok. You have to grant the buyer a mind of his own. He knows what he wants, and if he wants it, he'll buy it. If he doesn't want it, he usually won't. The other emotion about charging is fear. We tend to feel that if we charge a goodly amount, somehow our market will disappear and we'll all be bankrupt next Thursday. Yet, even with all the economies bouncing up and down and all the uncertainty people feel around lack, the quality items of the world go on forever. There will always be a market for Rolls Royces, French champagne, five-star hotels, and villas on the beach. All you have to do is agree to come from quality. That means energy. I'll devote a section on that as it seems to be so vital. In TikTok, People see the marketplace with all its structures and price formats, and they feel constrained by that. They see the elements of competition and they feel that their financial future is uncertain, which in many cases it is. But this is because though TikTok has products and services, for the most part, it has little energy. Every hamburger joint is exactly like all the rest, as are all the gas stations, laundromats, airlines, and whatever. In a market where things are imbued with no real energy, all they can sell you is the hardcore product, which is often dissatisfying, for you feel intuitively that it has no life. It is usually flat and boring and churned out by the millions. Once you can infuse your life's energy with enthusiasm, creativity, and originality, the things you offer the world take on a different tone. Now you are no longer competing with TikTok and you can charge what you like. Remember that the spiritual energy of the earth, the God force, put in it whatever terms you like. It's not aware of worth. I know it's common for people to think of God as a fellow sitting on some throne somewhere, watching everything, eyeing the price of Hondas this year. But that is not so. If you understand the metaphysical truth of the world, you will see God is more of an energy than a person. So, what a Christian might see as the grace of God is an Asian would say the eternal Tao flowing through all things. The point here is that it is pricey only a factor of emotion. The point here is that price is only a factor of emotion and that God force is not involved in human emotion. In other words, the God force has no emotional attachment to owning a digital diddly that opens the cat flap in the front door. Say, so 10 or 60 million feels the same to it. Worth is only a factor of emotion, nothing else. Things that people feel good about, that they want, are worth more than things they don't want. It seems to me that the God force and the life force are one and the same. Your life force is your energy, your enthusiasm, what you put out. So if the energy that sustains the world has no idea of worth, then there's no limit to how much of that life force spiritual energy you can transform into cash, should you so desire. First, you have to liberate your feelings from any awkwardness about setting your prices. You see yourself as a transfer of energy. People can get things anywhere. Energy is much more rare. When you see yourself transferring energy, there's no particular value to that energy. So there's no limit to what people can give you, meaning that in your dedication to energy, you are in fact serving people. Not only do the things you have not only do the things you do have a special worth, but also you allow others to discover in whatever you do a higher ideal, an exhilaration, a quickening that is not found in the round of the mill. People have needs, and when you meet those needs, you serve them not only because you save them the hassle of looking elsewhere, but also because what you offer has a unique specialness. I know a guy who has a small shop that repairs electrical equipment. He's a genius in his field. His energy is mature. He's like a wise old sage. He is always packed with work and he loves the job he does. People come to him just to experience being with him. They bring him the things to fix, he fixes them, and a week later they bring him the same item in perfect working order, and he fixes it again. I asked him what his secret is, and he told me that the items people brought him were only symbols of their own lives. And as he patches up the toaster, he sees himself healing their lives as well. The customers linger in the shop, and he might offer a word of encouragement or a positive affirmation. He always shows them what quality is, and bit by bit, his regulars return and they learn about themselves and see themselves in a different light. So once you can see that, you can relax about what price you're charging and just work on giving people as much energy as possible and feeling good about yourself. When people come to you for, say, a healing massage, you say 100 and they say, well, wasn't it 50 last week? And you reply, yes, but this week I feel good about myself, 100. Try this as a practice. For the next 30 days, don't do anything for anyone without charging. Force yourself to charge for everything. When you are asked to give someone a lift to the station, tell them it will cost $20. This is an exercise. It's hard for people because people expect you to do all sorts of things for nothing. When you tell them it will cost them, they react. The lesson you have to learn is not to react. Also, be careful that you don't find yourself making excuses. I have to charge 20 because I'm so poor and miserable and I'm not going to survive today without your money. No, just say, you want to go to the station? Fine, $20. Stand your ground. It is irrelevant if they hire you or not. The lesson lies in your becoming comfortable with telling people that you feel worthy. In the metaphysical circles that I come from, it's called WHAM, which stands for What About Me? It is easy, isn't it, to forget to include yourself? We spend so much time helping others through a sense of dedication that we drop out on collecting a bit for ourselves. There seems to be a constant conflict between commercial activity and goodness. The way to reconcile this is to separate the two. You can be generous and warm hearted in your personal life, but business is business. You should never forget that. In your commercial activity, you should come from an energy that demands everything. I know that nowadays the win win method is touted as fair solution, meaning that you get most of what you want and others in negotiation get most of what they want. Everyone wins in theory, anyway. The problem with that idea is that you go into a business meeting having given a great chunk of the high ground away in your feeling before you even open your mouth. It is right that things should be fair, but it is also right for you to start the conversation by demanding everything. If you go into a deal saying, I'll take 50%, your opponent can beat you down from there and you might end up with less than half. It's better, therefore, that you operate out of wham. Start on the top of a hill. When asked how much you want, look them straight in the eye and say, all of it. They are not going to believe what they are hearing. That's okay. You're not here to keep them happy. Now, if your feelings are aligned to wham, you'll be comfortable in demanding 100% of the deal. And if they're happy with win-win, they're going to ask for 50%. That leaves you in the strong position of saying, look, I'll take 25% less than what I want. And you, in turn, take 25% less than what you want. That's fair, isn't it? You walk out of the door with 75 rubles to their 25. Fair isn't anything that two or more people agree to. Now, it's not my way to go out and screw people to the floor for every last dime. The effort is not worth it. Everyone's entitled to turn a buck or two. But when you're presenting yourself in the marketplace, if you don't come from a position of demanding everything in the front end, you usually wind up with less than what you're worth at the back end. How many readers of this book are doing a job today and getting paid diddly squat only because 7 years ago, when they originally went for the job interview, they were a bit nervous and forgot to feel worthy, so they failed to demand everything? It's only a matter of self-confidence, really. Try saying it to yourself over and over as an affirmation. It makes you feel marvelous. How much do you want? All of it. How much do you want? All of it. How much do you want? Of course, it's very unusual for people to agree to give you all of it. They'll beat you down, but at least with my method, you capture all of the territory up front in your feelings, so then you have plenty to give away. Dollar Dance Concept 4. Learning to charge properly is vital to abundance. Affirm that you will never devalue yourself by charging less than what you feel you are worth. Of course, even in business, you'll cut some people slack from time to time, but if you overdo it, you disempower yourself in the end. Your lack of financial dexterity will make you angry. You need money to fuel your quest. You have to learn to demand what you want from life, remembering that no one knows what the hell you do want till you tell them. You have to accept what's coming to you and bill people properly. Once you are completely comfortable with charging, then and only then will you allow yourself to do things for free. That way, if you perform a kindness for another, you will know that you are doing it because you want to, not because you have been manipulated into it or are maneuvering in the hopes of winning their affection. The final point about charging is its great benefit to you. If you are offering a service or product, it is no fun in performing that service. Your life becomes a negative uphill struggle. By charging a goodly amount for what you do and by coming from a quality experience, you will naturally, without offending anyone, get rid of the lower end of the market. As we said, only the restricted people of the world believe that there is not enough. Believe in the penny off discount philosophy. It's hard to try to make it financially working in that kind of market. Further, poor people are usually extremely negative and have a tendency to bring you down by constantly focusing on what isn't rather than what is. By charging and doing things well, you are automatically moving up a notch or two and appeal to the people who have bundles. I don't mean mega millionaires necessarily, but the more affluent, upwardly mobile types. It is a fact that there are all sorts of people, millions of them, for whom price is irrelevant. What they want is energy. That energy can be offered in beauty, service, efficiency, positivity, or value. These upwardly mobile people are usually very busy. They want things quickly and efficiently, and they want to produce a product or service to work. What it costs is not a major factor in their decisions. So when you invest your energy in things, they become wonderful. There is no defined limit as to what you can charge. I don't mean that you should stiff people and overcharge. What I mean is that at the lower end of the market, everyone knows exactly how many cents a carrot costs. At the upper end, the kind of people who buy endive imported from Belgium could give a damn. They just want the endive. They couldn't tell you what endive costs if their life depended on it. That's the kind of character you want to be hanging with because that is the kind of affluent character you want to become. In a world where everything is so ordinary and dull and things are churned out the same way year in and year out, if you come from a place of originality and invest energy in things and people respond, it is a joy, is it not? To discover things that are so special, shops that are truly different, restaurants that actually give good service or create original food, places where people make just that little bit of effort. When you find such a place, you're happy to pay for it. You know that the quality and fun you get is worth 100 times the junk offered in the ordinary world. It is not hard to be original. You have to only think in terms of what people want. Take hotels. People go there to wash up, sleep, and head out again. But the owners of those hotels spend the least amount of money in the bedrooms. Instead, they spend untold millions building the lobby. It's great for the owner's ego, but who sleeps in the lobby? For goodness sake, isn't it a fact that often on checking out, you feel disappointed? You feel that the hotel didn't quite come up to what you were expecting? The other thing that you want in a hotel is real service. You have to go to Europe or the East for that. It's not part of the American psyche to serve. They find no joy in it. Even in the best hotels in America, their service sucks. Why? Because they don't train their staff to serve. The whole system is designed to suit the convenience of the management, not the customer. Containing the service is how they trim costs. On occasions, I have had the misfortune of being booked into one of the Marriott hotels in the US. There's one at the airport in Washington, D.C. In the entrance, there's a photo of old man Marriott himself, grinning at the suckers who are checking into his hotel. Behind the desk, there's a huge sign that says something like, "We're dedicated to your service." I had rented one of their ballrooms for a seminar. The seminar was scheduled till 6 in the evening, so I asked the girl at the front desk if I could leave two trunks in the room, as she had already told me she was not going to be needing the room until the next day. She refused. I pointed out that I was spending untold thousands at their establishment. She still refused. I mentioned that I had pulled 250 people into their hotel, all of whom were eating lunch in their restaurant. That didn't work either. I asked her if the sign behind the desk meant anything, or was it just hiding a hole in the wall? She offered me a snotty grunt and wandered into the back room. That grunt cost old man Marriott 20 to 30,000 so far. I have never spent another penny with that company, and none of my staff members stay there either. Now, if you and I were opening a hotel, we'd concentrate on the stuff people really want. We wouldn't mess with the stupid sign at the desk. We would give the customers the real thing. We'd spend most of our money on the rooms. The lobby would be simple and cozy, but the rooms would be lush. Have you ever noticed how rinky-dink hotel towels are? There are never enough of them. I'd get special towels made, 6 feet long by 3 feet wide. I'd give each room 8, 10, as many as they wanted. I'd build a little closet for the towels and heat them. I'd give people monogram bathrobes with the hotel's name on them, and I would allow customers to pinch them. People love it when they feel they're getting something for nothing. Plus, every time the guy takes a shower back home, there's your ad. It's included in the cost of the robes and the price of the room. Next, on every floor, I'd put a desk and a host or hostess by the elevator. Their function would be to greet the customers to ensure that their every wish and whim be granted. I'd have real blankets, not those brown synthetic jobs most hotels provide. Every room would have a four-poster bed. What does it cost? It's only four poles and a bit of drape, but it feels regal. Lovers especially like that stuff. Finally, I get all my staff in the parking lot at dawn, and I'd have them jump up and down, shouting, "The customer's always right, even when they're wrong." I'd make the staff do that until they got it, even if it took an hour every morning. Those who really couldn't get it, I'd bust to Marriott. Life is so simple, really. Think through what people want, watch others fail to give them, and provide it, then bill them. In the dollar dance of life, there's One more point that I want you to focus on, for it will become vital to you as your abundance consciousness grows. The world is rich, very rich, especially the Western democracies. Now, if you're reading this book, it is more than likely that you live in one of these very abundant countries. If you don't, move. To be abundant, you have to hang out in dimensions that are abundant. The point here is that people tend to focus only on what is lacking. They rarely focus on what is available or real or actually there. So, for example, in the United States at this time, we have about 6 million people on the dole. There is a workforce of around 105 million people, which means that there are 99 million not on the dole. Those characters earn on average close to 20,000 per year, but many of them earn much, much more. In fact, more than 1 million of them are millionaires. Let us say that we take the double national average wage as our norm. That is $40,000. And we add up how many people in America earn that. You would be amazed to discover that there are more folk in the 40,000 plus range than there are on the dole, meaning that for everyone who is out of work, there are many more who are experiencing abundance and actually earning double the national average. You can apply this kind of thinking to almost every Western democracy you want to look at. Take England as another example. If you drew a line from Cambridge to Bristol, the area south of that line is just a few hundred miles square. In that hallowed spot live some of the most abundant, rich people in the world. Their wealth is vast. Collectively, they own a sizable percentage of the world. Interestingly enough, they are some of the largest foreign owners of property in the United States. Now, if you read the British papers, you would get the impression that everything is going down the pan and that those people are having trouble rubbing two royal pennies together. That is not truth. But would say the negative souls. What about the north of England? It's so miserable and poor and wretched, and the industry there is so depressed. And I would say to them, true. But what is positive and lovely about the north of England is that it is not that far away. A 30-pound bus ride gets you over the Cambridge Bristol line and in the thick of things. Plus, there isn't any reason why you can't make it anywhere. It's just that some spots are more conducive to abundance than others. The ego personality tends to want to plop on one spot and stay there, to be surrounded with what it knows, even if what it knows is not that pleasant. Yet one of the features of the wealth is that they move around a lot. And in the same way that the abundance of nature is patchy, some places are green and plentiful, while other places are deserts. The abundance of the world tends to congregate in specific areas. Markets come and go, values rise and fall. To be a part of that nowadays, you need good communications, reliable information, and a fast pair of legs. Successful people are usually more lively than those who are unsuccessful. The quickening of the spirit, they the quickening of the spirit they feel comes out of their creativity, and success detaches them from the more rigid outlook on life. It puts them in the flow. So the shakers and movers, by their very nature, are moving faster, taking more risks and investing more in the world than their less creative counterparts. They have joined, so to speak. Thus, they are naturally entitled to a more fluid, more free lifestyle. Not because anyone is dishing out little merit badges of good fortune hither and thither, but because to those who have energy, more shall be naturally added. All you have to do is agree to join. You may have already done so. Perhaps all you need is to polish up your act and focus your intent. It's very likely that many of you are just a hair's breadth away from another load. Hang on. Excuse me. It's very likely that many of you are just a hair's breadth away from the mother load. Hang on. Don't lose heart. By being involved long enough and forcefully enough, you will discover that eventually the system delivers. Too many quit before the final payout. In the meantime, you're going to have to work on your energy. For at this level, your currency is energy, nothing more. As you raise your energy, the people show up, and now you'll be comfortable billing them. It is nothing more complicated than that. As you get stronger, it gets easier and easier. Let us press on and look at energy and how you will raise yours. Chapter 5. Making money is a piece of cake, chocolate cake. What you put out is what you get back. And the reason why so many people are short of money is that they put little or nothing out. If you are truly dedicated to getting into that dollar dance of life, you're going to have to get used to creating almost constant energy. But before you lift a finger, let us look at the quality of energy you are putting out so that when your energy mixes with that of the marketplace of life, you will only need small amounts of what you are in order to generate larger amounts in return. Otherwise, you sentence yourself to a life of grueling struggle, a life where at every turn you see evidence of how the world does not respond to or does not accept in commercial terms the things you have to offer. Abundance consciousness is a piece of cake, chocolate cake. To have it is a natural part of your modus. We need to look at three main headings in your attitudes to those topics: intellectual abundance, emotional or spiritual abundance, physical, commercial abundance. If you think about our society, you see how the older generation, coming as they do from hard times, often endorses a view that shortages are rife. All of our culture and even our sayings endorse this. A stitch in time saves nine, a penny saved is a penny earned. The meek shall inherit the earth. I met Meek once. He's a Jewish lawyer in Philadelphia. He's richer than God. How many times have you heard that to make money, you have to work hard? Who told you that? The people who told you were the ones who had experienced life as hard. They wanted you to experience it in the same way so that you could join them and they wouldn't get lonely. The people who try to sell you on the struggle of life are those who, by virtue of that struggle, know little about how to make it. Best not to use them as advisors. Of course, the idea that hard work and struggle are inevitable is nonsense. Inside the energy of abundance, there is no struggle, only flow. If you are struggling, there is something about your thinking or modus that needs adjustment. Effort is as natural part of our physical state, but struggle is effort laced with emotion, and that is unnatural and unholy. You don't need it. But it's not surprising that we do struggle. For all the institutions that control the flow of information to the people, whether it be religion, media, or bureaucracy, have to appeal to the common denominator. No politician can get up on his orange box and tell the truth like this. This country is really abundant. 95% are doing really well. Let's not bother too much about the deadbeats. There aren't that many of them anyway. So, part of our abundance intellect would have to step beyond the great lies of life, the lies perpetrated by the mindset of TikTok. The mindset will never agree that things are actually okay, even if they should become so. The concepts of TikTok have to sustain a constant discomfort in order to keep everyone under control. The institutions of the world, as well as the mindset of the ordinary man, have a vested interest in setting their sights nice and low. That way, no one has to achieve too much in order to make it. And if they fail, they don't fail by too much either. Imagine the leaders getting up and saying, "Hey, abundance is natural, and anyone who's not making 100,000 a year will be fined for lack of effort." The campaign slogan would go down like a brick balloon. But in fact, metaphysically, that is actually what is happening. Those who create little or nothing are penalized by life, the circumstances of life, for the riches of their possibilities are taken from them. So you can create all the phony circumstances you want, but at the end, what is truth is truth. It lays there for all to see, as if someone plopped an oily Spanish omelet on your chest. It's impossible to ignore. To become rich, you first have to accept that intellectually. You have to think rich. This is achieved in two ways. First, you never endorse a thought from a form of scarcity or lack in your circumstances. And further, you never endorse the poverty of others. As a part of this change in consciousness, you begin to align and to acknowledge the richness of things. So when a fine looking limo passes you on the freeway, rather than saying, "Capitalist lackey, you must be a crook," say to yourself, "How nice stretch limos look and how simple they are to obtain." In addition, it's important that you never view another person's success as an affirmation of lack. If you hear of a friend who's doing well, it's so easy for his or her success to highlight the fact that perhaps you are doing less well. It's only a matter of intellect. If you're doing well, you can develop a thinking that uses their success to confirm and endorse that the world is truly a creative place to be. Their success should be encouraging, for if that plank can make it, so can you. But you have to allow your thinking to expand to accept the image of absolute abundance as natural. That can be hard, as we are programmed into lack by 1,001 messages that all have our lack at heart. Further, we are influenced by the constant bombardment that mediocrity offers us a truth. Not only are you the product of all the information that is going on, but you are also the product of many inputs and which you are not consciously aware. Your mind picks up all stores and stores all conscious events, but it is also the owner of those bits of information that it picks up subliminally. Often you are not able to consciously disagree with whatever subliminal input has entered your mind. You might be standing in the supermarket feeling abundant with a trolley full of groceries, and a person 3 or 4 aisles away picks up a can of beans, looks at you, and says, "Bloody hell, the world's falling apart. I can't afford that." Even though the comment may be up 40 decibels below your normal earshot, it goes into your mind, and you can from that form at that as a part of your reality. Now, it's natural for you to think that you are not influenced in your thinking by the energy of others, but the fact is you are. Everything that you think and feel is shaped by your life's experiences, and those experiences are a reflection of whatever consciousness you held at the particular time. That consciousness was and still is the product of whatever you believe to be real. So, to say that you are not influenced by the thought of others is ludicrous. For if you were to track back and unravel every experience of your life, you could eventually understand what created it and how it came from your mind. Sooner or later, you would get down to how it got there, and you would find that it came from someone else. The average person's experience of the world is very limited. For example, only a minority of people ever travel outside their own country, and an even smaller percentage ever visit more than, say, 10 other countries. Yet everyone has an opinion about what's going on in the world, even though they don't really have a clue what they're talking about. I love those surveys when they ask the man in the street what he thinks of the Persian Gulf or whatever. 60% says the government is making a mess of things, 32% says it's doing fine, and 8% reply, don't know. I have the deepest respect for the don't knows, for they are the only ones actually telling the truth. The rest of us are talking out the back of their hat. And so it is with abundance thinking. Everything you learn came from someone else. Most likely, what you learned was extremely debilitating and tainted by the opinion of others. You took that as your reality and projected that form from your consciousness. Bit by bit, the circumstances you experienced in life began to reflect whatever you believed. So you were able to underwrite those beliefs with personal experiences that confirm to you that, say, making money is hard work. Thus, every time you get close to making a pile of quick money, something comes along to sabotage it, and you live in a reality that falls a bit short of the final payout. Intellectually, it is often hard to understand why. Once that type of shortfall has occurred 3 or 4 times over a period of years, you are then scarred for life, unless you are very forceful in your contradiction of that energy. Dollar Dance Concept 5. Because money is a major psychic symbol of security, every thought you have that endorses your insecurity affects your money making abilities. Money flows towards stability and away from its converse. To lay down a thinking strong enough to defend you from the bombardment of negative energy offered is not a complicated process, but it does take mental discipline. It forces you to constantly police your mind to override your own negativity and the negativity of others. If, for example, you track your thoughts for an hour each day, you will be amazed to discover that on average, you will have 6 to 10 insecurity thoughts each hour. These thoughts can be concerns about your health, about your safety or injury. They can be various worries about money. If I leave my car here, will it get stolen, or they will be just various emanations of the general insecurity that the mind believes to be real. Then, while watching your thoughts carefully, notice how many of those insecurities deal with money. You will notice that the mind is constantly concerned with being ripped off or losing what it has. Will there be enough? What if everything collapses and so forth? When you go out and make a deal and it falls apart, the mind does not understand logically why that happened. Yet, pummeled into your consciousness are hundreds or even thousands of negative inputs that fracture your confidence and ruin your psychic stability. As you bring that damaged self into the circumstances of life, it is natural that those circumstances soon reflect the same uncertainty. It's hard for people to realize that these two aspects of their lives that seem disconnected are, in fact, interrelated, because money is a major psychic symbol of security. Every thought you have that endorses your insecurity affects your money making abilities. Those thoughts create instability in your energy. Money flows towards stability and away from its converse. This negative pillaging of your self confidence gives off telltale signs that others pick up immediately. Those signs remind them of their own vulnerability. People won't part with their money unless they feel safe. If there is the slightest doubt, they'll head for the bushes. To heal this aspect of your life, you have to train yourself to feel secure, even if there is no evidence to suggest such to be the case. You have to settle into the uncertainty of things and be comfortable with it. Never voice negativity, even if things are not going well. Your world is changing. There's always tomorrow, and all will work out fine in the end. If you have suffered a major financial setback, you can rest in the thought that you were crafty enough to make the cash in the first place. Now your energy is moving upward, and it will take you no time at all to replace that which has slipped away. Powerful consciousness about life and money is only habit. Agree to change your habits if that's what it takes. Simple, really. To make it in life, you have to get out there and hustle your butt, for the system is stacked against you. To become wealthy requires you to exert the force of your will in order to penetrate the bubble of control that surrounds us. It is a fact that 90% of working Americans retire with net assets of just $400. That's mind boggling. Of the remaining 4%, 2% retire comfortably, and 2% have become very rich. Why is that so? It's because every turn, money is taken from you. You incur tax liabilities 24 hours of the day. Every move you make is taxed. The system is designed so that no one can actually find out what tax they've paid. Or one can't track every purchase ever made or how much tax was included in the price. Every time a buck is taken from you, you lose the use of the dollar for life. The system sucks 40 to 50% out of everyone's income annually, so the government controls most of the capital. They also employ most of the people. Half the workforce is employed by the government or by companies that contract solely to the system. The government owns almost all of the land, only a minute percentage is in private hands. Further, the powers that be control and regulate the market forces through which citizens have to operate. It is exactly like the mafia. In TikTok, people are too apathetic to push against this nonsense and become successes anyway. The Western democracies are the freest in the world. Certainly, no one would argue that the American Constitution is anything but fair, but it is, but for, excuse me, for it is the most politically sophisticated on the planet. But although we have a good legal system and are protected by the Bill of Rights, we have little or no financial freedom. Dollar Dance Concept 6. The greatest revenge is doing well. How is the average person going to feel free and develop an abundance consciousness when the system takes half his profit and controls his every commercial move? Under these circumstances, what does democracy really do for you? You may get to vote from time to time, which is better than not having a vote. But if you can't control what the prune does when he gets to parliament, what's the use? What fascinates me about the American political system is that once a person takes his or her seat in Congress, he or she is rarely voted out. It's a bit like Russia. At election time, many of the US politicians are reelected unopposed or face no real contest. Over 90% are back again the following week. This is because in America, there's a quaint practice whereby you can give an elected member of Congress large sums of money to win his or her affection, and that gift is not considered a bribe or illegal. Of course, it was the politicians themselves who passed this rule. Free money and thus power is intoxicating. No one will vote to change that. Once happily seated, the member quickly builds a vast war chest that he or she brings to bear upon opponents at election time. The second part of this quaint practice that also boggles the mind is that when a politician retires, he or she is allowed to keep whatever sums are in the chest unspent. Many have over $1 million tucked away for retirement day. How or why would a character thus benefited ever vote against interests that provide free money so generously? Is it the common man who provides this largesse? No, it's the forces in control that need his vote and his power, not the individual. If someone can toss a congressman 100 grand to regulate the price of a leg of beef so that all the common folk are paying over the top, it's natural that the forces in control would do that. What's 100 grand compared to an extra buck or two on every chunk of beef consumed in the country? It's not surprising that the politicians are so despised and disliked by the people. Let's face it, if your senator fell off a cliff, you might momentarily regret that it wasn't you who shoved him, but you wouldn't exactly lose a lot of sleep over his demise, would you? Of course, the politicians don't see it that way. They kid themselves that they have the people's affection, a bit as Mussolini did, and they waffle on about service and commitment while each day they vote to bind the people further. In the end, the average guy, realizing he can't beat the system, walks away. It's not surprising that the majority of the people are politically apathetic. What other option have they got? Apathy, after all, is a quality much revered by governments. For a sleeping population doesn't read the small print. TikTok is then cheap to control. Over the years, the powers that be have trussed us up by regulating and taxing our every commercial activity. No one minds contributing a bit to the pot, but over time, the system has been inflated to where thousands upon thousands of regulatory agencies exist to take the fruit of our labor and ensure control over the system. You are as free as a bird as long as you don't want to do anything. But if you cross the street and open a pizza parlor, 20 government officials jump into bed with you. Most independent business people in this country are basically working for the government. Half of their week is spent working for nothing to pay what is supposedly owed in tax. And part of the rest of the week is lost to feeding the bureaucratic behemoth its daily diet of little forms of and returns. Think of this: all the money in the world really belongs to the governments. It's theirs. They printed it. And even though they may hand it out a little bit for us to play with, they have made damn sure they are going to get it back eventually. What you have is only a loan from them. It can be taken from you at a moment's notice. Most Americans don't remember when Roosevelt passed laws repossessing all their gold. More recently, Mexico had a cheery little fellow called Presidente Madrid running the show, having built himself in endless palaces while his people starved. He then ran a little short. But the intrepid Presidente didn't let cash flow problems spoil his fun. He nationalized all the banks and let the peso collapse, dropping from an exchange rate to 8 to the US dollar to 2,400 to the US dollar. Where it stands today, many hardworking Mexicans lost their life savings overnight. The others, having gotten wind of where Madrid was heading, began shipping their cash out of the country to the tune of billions per week. Naturally, the government newspapers called them chiselers and rats for not wanting to lose everything. Meanwhile, back in the US, the Congress was supporting Presidente Madrid like crazy. Our illustrious leaders had added up the difference between 8 pesos and 2,400, and suddenly they had 2,392 good excuses for shipping Madrid millions in our money to keep him on the job. The upshot of for Mexico was that the capital infrastructure was destroyed as the smart money fled, and the people were impoverished even further. American businesses operating just over the border at places such as Juarez loved it. They could run an entire factory for the cost of one donut a week. The upshot for American people was that illegal immigration from across the Rio Grande skyrocketed. Social services in big cities such as LA came under immense pressure, denying even the tax-paying legal citizen stuff they were entitled to. In addition, the final bill has not been presented. One day, the folk in Mexico are going to get sorely pissed off. When that happens, they're going to blame the US with good reason, I'd say, and they'll tear that joint apart. It's going to cost the US taxpayer an arm and a leg to pop over there and fix it. You can't ignore a crazed elephant that's stomping through your garden. It's no surprise that the average Joe doesn't really believe that the world is abundant, for he has to operate in a system that sucks the lush out of his life and leaves it a bit bare. Of course, the forces in control don't have the same problem. That is why we have a world in which many are immensely rich, which the rest are scraping by or perhaps even doing okay. But it's hard for the average guy to wind up with any real surplus. What to do? There is nothing you can do. The way it is, that's the way it is. It's too energy draining to get upset. You have four options. First, you could be a cog in the system and settle for that. Alternatively, you could possibly join the privilege classes and hook up to the free money, delivering coffee pots to the Pentagon at $1,000 a pop. Third, you could live as a fringe dweller and operate outside the system. Or finally, you could accept that you exist in unfavorable circumstances and make a success of it anyway. The greatest revenge is doing well. But there is a saving grace in all this nonsense. Although the government takes half your money, it's still possible to make an untold fortune with half they leave behind. The taxes and regulations just delay your reaching financial freedom, but they can't stop you completely. So the name of the game is not to allow the situation to influence you too much and to head for the target no matter what. As the Romans might have said, non illegimati carbudurum, or loosely translated, don't let the bastards grind you down. In the same way that you need to feel secure even when you're not, this dimension also requires you to feel financially free in your heart when, at the beginning of your career anyway, this is not usually the case. You have to understand that there is no guarantees in life. There is no absolute security, and there is usually no simple path to financial success. It's going to take some effort. For the mind to chase after security is ludicrous. It will never get it. And the irritation of constant seeking security destroys what stability there is. It is simpler, therefore, to agree that one doesn't need security. One doesn't even need a system that favors one. All that is ever needed is what one already has, which is creativity and energy. You don't have to become immortal to be safe. All you have to do is acknowledge that what you are right now is enough to keep you safe and more than enough to keep you in abundance for the rest of your days, in spite of circumstances. You just need you, comfortable inside yourself. Next, move your thinking out of the mass discontent of life, and you can begin to see that the universal law covers our destiny. In fact, it is absolutely fair. Life is fair, even when it isn't. And although the mind of TikTok will insist that misfortune and chance are real, that opinion in itself, held as it is by millions, does not make it truth. It is just opinion. I appreciate that at some levels of TikTok, people exercise almost no control over their affairs and so feel that they are abandoned to the vagaries of chance. However, there is a level of operation that lies somewhat beyond TikTok, in which one accepts absolute responsibility for the circumstances of one's life and understands that by correctly projecting consciousness and actions onto reality, one can dominate that reality, going beyond its restrictions and moving it into any direction one wishes. The fact that a million people standing next to you don't know how to do that doesn't make you wrong and them right. Further, projected power or of self grants you the only security you will ever have or need. Then the metaphysics of universal law in motion becomes fair, for you live only in mental, emotional, and spiritual projection of who you are. So what you get is yours. Events belong to you personally. And at that level, life becomes simple. For you waste no energy or thought in wondering why this and why that. Everything is obvious. And in the natural truth of things, what to do is also obvious. Life takes on a new meaning, for you mean for it to do so. To make a lot of money, you have to decide to become somewhat abnormal. Normal people are rarely successful, and what success they do enjoy is often tainted by their discomfort in life. So when they make a pile of cash, it is useless to them. And in fact, it often traps them deeper within the ghetto of the mind. By abnormal, I don't mean becoming a weirdo, but merely that you take on abundance consciousness that is different from the way most people think. What you are trying to do is change the way you feel and operate, not only from a monetary point of view, but also in all around spiritual and physical point of view from which you approach life. You're trying to become a truly independent being. Abundance is one aspect of that independence. As you incorporate money making into your spiritual quest, it takes on an added impetus. Just making money for the sake of making it can become vapid and boring. But when your financial success is linked to your spiritual desire for true independence, then your money making efforts will take on a kind of holiness. People often miss that point. It comes back to the point made earlier that people tend to think that money is not spiritual. This is because, especially in the olden days, the major religions taught that poverty was holy and that wealth was not. Years ago, when all the major religions were getting started, society was made up of the kings, the landed gentry, and then everybody else. The religions needed members to survive, so they naturally had to appeal to the common folk, most of whom were desperately poor. In order to win the affection of the masses, poverty had to be made okay, better than okay. The poor would ask, "Hey, how come your God lets me starve?" There was no decent answer to that, so the religions promised the poor a special place in heaven, which was a bit simpler than trying to figure out how to fix everyone's desperate circumstances. Now, if you look at our planet, especially in the modern day, you can see that we live in a place that is exceptionally lush. As was said before, there is a surplus of everything. The climate is temperate for the most part, the seas are full of richness, and there is every fuel, mineral, and chemical that we will ever need at our feet. The sun shines in our lands and grants us vast richness. There is more food than we can ever eat. There is more wealth, creativity, and resources than we can ever use up. Now, think of this. Why would God or the God force put us in a dimension of such incredible wealth and abundance, a veritable Garden of Eden, and expect us to be poor and lacking in our needs? It makes no sense. It is natural that we would use the resources around us and gradually become abundant. God must have foreseen that and had having a high probability, given the dimension we live in, richness is natural. To make that philosophy wrong and make poverty, which is so unnatural, right, is a conceptual flip flop. It may serve certain vested interests, but under the universal law governing the naturalness of things, this cannot be truth. Imagine a God who considers the dole and food stamps holy and good, and alternately considers the opening of a factory that grants creativity and wealth to, say, 100 families wrong. You can stick that in your ear, kid. It just ain't true. But we bought into all this stuff, and at the level to which we bought in is probably the level at which we find ourselves financially today. Understand that for the most part, all the things we were taught is true that you hold to so dearly in your consciousness are probably two-thirds or four-fifths ludicrous. However, that twaddle and weakness you took on is a gift, for it allows you to climb. It gives you a challenge to go beyond. Within the difficulty of that fractured consciousness, you can transcend and change so that your life becomes an expression of massive energy. Your pleasure is being on a quest. Your pleasure in being on a quest gives you a reason for living, which of course is a lot different from just surviving. Thinking big and thinking rich will help you go beyond the poverty of the world, but it isn't all that you're going to need. To really develop financial power, you probably have to exist in a reality that is separate from the status quo. The status quo is vested with keeping you and the rest of the world in line. You have to break out of that. When you walk out into the marketplace and you look at the price of things, what you see is just a thought form, people's opinion. It is not necessarily real. The market is established thus because in the minds of the traders, taking your money is reasonable. So markets are always stacked slightly against the consumer. There is an unwanted agreement among the manufacturers, distributors, and retailers on how much they can charge the public and get away with. Markets are arranged to establish and benefit the status quo. In the town in which I live, there are about a dozen gas stations. Every station sells unleaded gasoline at exactly the same price. There's not even a tenth of a cent difference. Coincidence? Hardly. Here, gas sells for approximately 10 cents more per gallon than anywhere else in the state. For this arrangement to work, all the traders have to come to a special agreement, for normally it is impossible for 12 people to randomly agree on anything. So the residents who live here constantly pay over the top for their gas because the cartel sustains and defends this thought form. Even in free markets, prices are relatively fixed. When you go into a store and they offer you 20% off, it looks at the surface as if they are giving you something. But what are you getting a discount on? On the marketplace thought form, price is a product of emotion. There is no real worth to anything, but the markets are maneuvered in such a way that once a price is established over time, that opinion or thought form becomes rigid. To challenge the established opinion is considered a heresy, and a threat to survival. There is usually a adverse reaction if you dare to combat what is often an emotional manipulation of paying public, of the paying public. This is because once a price or a market practice that has been established by repetition, the price enters the minds of those engaged in the market almost as a God given right. It becomes part of the overall pattern that guarantees survival. They consider it reasonable, so contradicting the status quo is taboo. If, for example, you went over to your neighbor's house on Friday at noon and you gave him $1,000, he would be delighted. Let's say you repeated this gift every night for 9 weeks. In doing so, you establish a status quo in his emotions. By now, your neighbor has budgeted the free money into his overall plan. On the 10th Friday, without saying a word, you decide not to make the gift. So you don't show up. Your decision would cause a negative reaction. More than likely, he would call you a communist and a rat, for you have tampered with his survival mechanism. You can't go out and bitch at the price of a candy bar. In doing so, you would destroy your equilibrium. But you can, from time to time, challenge the norm as a way of affirming that your reality is just as valid as anyone else's. In my seminars, I ask the participants to go into a store, pick a fairly high priced item, a TV set perhaps, and then bid the storekeeper about 20% of the sticker price. Try it. Do it every day for a week or two until you feel comfortable pressing against the bubble. The exercise teaches you two things. It affirms your self image and it allows you to practice emotional detachment as the storekeeper jumps up and down. There's his TV, all gleaming and shiny with an $800 thought form printed on a little card. And you turn, look him straight in the eye and say, "Thank you. I'll take it. Here's 160, all cash." The next 2 minutes are a metaphysical pantomime, second to none. As soon as you make the offer, start counting out the money. The storekeeper's first thought will be that you must be joking. While counting out the cash, look down. That defends you from the psychic power of his reaction. Regardless of what he says, continue to act as if it is a done deal and toss a question about whether he offers free delivery or not. By pushing through, with these follow-up actions, you confirm your thought form, which is, give me this for 160 bucks. His reaction will be fairly predictable. Take no notice, walk over to the TV and smiling, lift it off the counter. By following up your lower offer with action, you are metaphysically trying to penetrate a thought form rather than just challenging it. If the storekeeper reacts negatively, watch and see how you react. We are trained to follow along like sheep. When you don't, your childhood memories flood back from the subconscious, and you feel that you are naughty and lousy for even daring to suggest a discount of 80%. Retain your poise. When you really get sophisticated at this game, try this. Go to a restaurant with a few friends, have a lovely meal, and order everything. When the waiter brings over the check, refuse to pay. Say in a loud voice that so that everyone can hear something such as, "I didn't think the meal was that good. The potatoes were a bit cold." Get your friends to back you up. It takes a certain force of will to pull this off because legally you are dead wrong, but strategically you have the high ground because the restaurant can't repossess the product. The exercise here is to sustain an opinion that contradicts the norm and to defend that opinion without emotion. You are not trying to be combative. You are just practicing holding a view that is diametrically opposed to the status quo. Again, you are not trying to be combative. You are just practicing holding a view that is diametrically opposed to the status quo. Niggling the status quo is a lot of fun. Even though you may not get the meal for free, you will usually come away with a hefty discount. By pressing the bubble, you affirm your self-image, which is a vital key to money making. But also it allows you to remember that your reality is as valid as, if not more, so than everyone else's. It trains you to stand your ground. Bit by bit, your thinking moves from TikTok into an unusual originality. Critical thinking, it's called. When you find yourself in a business situation, you will have trained your mind to see a dozen possibilities that no one else notices. Standing outside the norm allows your creative freedom that you can turn into cash. But as abundance thinking starts to become natural, there are several points you may need to watch. Thinking big is fine and it often brings you big results. But in its bigness, there is also propensity to collapse. Allow me to explain. Let us say that at the level at which you operate at this time is 100,000 a year. So now you are beginning to think in terms of a million. In the journey from 100,000 to a million, you will have to stay balanced and patient and concentrate on day to day things so that eventually you look up from your work and there is a million. However, often people who endorse thinking big have a tendency first to get out ahead of themselves, and second, to drift into fantasy. When their imagination takes them out beyond what is controllable, things tend to fall apart. As you climb, you have to concentrate. For in climbing, your propensity for imbalance is greater. If your mind is way out ahead of you, current events and responsibilities tend to be ignored, and lacking the empowerment of your concentration often unravel. Anytime you find yourself in transition, you should be aware that in moving from A to B, you need additional balance and even more centered concentration. The circumstances that you are familiar with, let's say the 100,000 level, you can control and dominate because you are used to them. But as you move toward the $1 million level, circumstances change and you will have to adapt to them gradually, developing an energy within you that can control circumstances that are 10 times bigger. Dollar Dance Concept 7. Concentrate on what you know or on what works. Don't allow the lure of activity to take you beyond what is comfortable and controllable. Often you will see a person develop a good idea. He opens a pizza shop and makes a success of that. Then the fellow tries to expand. So he opens three or four more shops, usually on borrowed money. The new units take all of this energy, and the original shops start to falter. He is now working 16 hours a day, and in the massive effort that it takes, he is thrown even further off balance. At this point, our man becomes mesmerized by his own activity. He decides that 10 million is where he ought to be, so he opens up a wholesale food trucking company, even though he knows little or nothing about that type of business. Suddenly, 4 trucks are hauling tomatoes through the night, and the fellow is pleased with himself. Now he can work 24 hours a day and really feel that his contribution is worthwhile. Meanwhile, pizza shop number one disintegrates, while in shop two, the manager is weeding the takings. Then the tomato business takes a nosedive, and one day our man looks up to view 2 tons of salami about to land on his head. It's over. The trick to thinking big is to allow your mind to carry you up and away, while your eyes are firmly focused down at your feet. Concentration on what you know or on what works. Don't allow the lure of activity to take you beyond where you feel comfortable and in control. Remember, there is no rush. You can get to a million in 6 months, or you can get there in 6 years. It won't make that much difference to you as long as you are balanced and enjoying life on the way. In fact, going slowly and savoring life as you go allows you to grant the journey more meaning. To hurtle along at breakneck speed is at times fun, but it ought to be tempered with times of standing still or evaluating what has been created, and of taking time to develop controls so that future efforts are not plunked on a rickety foundation. The final point about abundance consciousness and thinking big is to remember that the mind does not believe in its own fantasy. It is used to wandering around, imagining all sorts of things that it knows are not real. This is one of its entertainments. So if your fantasies overrun you, your mind indulges itself in that and fails to empower or concentrate on what is mundane but real. Gradually, the ego personality devalues what you are involved in right now and carries you out into a fantasy projection of the intellect. The result is that you become dissatisfied with what you are and what you have and start to concentrate almost exclusively on what you don't have. As you concentrate only on the unreal, it becomes more and more unobtainable, for the mind knows that you are not serious in your quest. Your thoughts are just daydreams, and each and every one of them serves as an affirmation that you consider your projections and goals to be unattainable. This gradually disengages you from those goals, and you spiral towards Stagnation. The energy of what you do have is neither empowered nor acknowledged by your mind. So bit by bit, its liveliness is used up. What you see around you becomes empty and lifeless. Then, trying to move from the self created dead zone into the fantasies becomes almost impossible. Unless, of course, your consciousness is prepared to do a 180-degree turn, which often it won't. As things become dead, apathy and negativity set in. Then enthusiasm for your quest dribbles away and is lost, partly to failure and often to confusion. Past successes are forgotten, current setbacks are made to seem even more real, and eventually you believe to be true about your life, it becomes set. As your energy gradually drops, you find yourself back in TikTok and look down to find that it has you by the short and curlies. Be warned, expansion is desirable, but it is also destructive. When taken gradually in comfort, it's a joy and delight to behold. If taken too fast, the spirit becomes overwhelmed and eventually discovers a way to disencumber itself. So you go bankrupt or die, or your quest self destructs. You don't need that. Look at the economic history of the world since the Second World War. Things have expanded like crazy. It didn't matter if we had the money to pay for that expansion or not. We have bred a society that is restless, that constantly wants more. So our governments churn out paper money to keep everyone happy. No one cares that a post-war dollar is now worth only 4 cents. All that imbalance will have to be dealt with someday. Expansion without control is a sure way of inviting collapse. If you have a good idea, perfect it even further. Then, from that microcosm, carry it forward into the macrosphere. Repeat that format over and over again. Then, bam, suddenly you have 800 hamburger joints. Pure TikTok, really. But you have to join in order to get out. The only way beyond TikTok is through it. While traveling through, you can disengage your thinking from the common consciousness and operate in a way that TikTok will appreciate. But you will think in a way that is free and personal to you. As you trump through, heading toward your final liberation, you will have to agree to take responsibility for things, including, of course, yourself. There are a few wealthy people who do not accept responsibility naturally. If you have avoided it in your life, you may want to focus on how much responsibility you are prepared to take. For although the surface responsibility seems an encumbrance to be avoided, poverty is an even greater drag. Taking responsibility is only a trap if your emotions are wrapped up in that responsibility. There is a way of being responsible for vast amounts of things and not to be particularly emotionally involved. That, of course, takes self confidence. It seems to me that the main reason why people won't take responsibility is that they lack confidence or are scared or feel that if they commit to something, they will be trapped in it for life. None of this is necessarily true. It will always depend on how you look at things. If you are not comfortable taking responsibility, then just put this book down for a moment and agree with yourself that you will take responsibility, whether you are comfortable with it or not. Otherwise, you sentence yourself to perpetual struggle. Further, you don't have to take on vast chunks at one time. Accept responsibility for, say, one or two new things. Complete those satisfactorily. Acknowledge that you did so and that it was a breeze, really, and then open yourself up for a bit more. To be responsible for small amounts and to be responsible for large amounts is no different, really. Both take your concentration and dedication. The difference being that when you agree to be responsible for many things, you earn more. So if you are prepared to be responsible for anything at all, you might as well elect for something huge, for in the end, it will serve you better. If you agree to manage one hamburger joint, you might as well agree to look after 800. For while managing one, you will never it will for while managing one will never set you free, accepting responsibility for all 800 will. And to get into that position of responsibility, you have only to agree with your mind that you will accept that. Just put it into your consciousness that you are prepared to accept more and more responsibility. And sooner or later, it shows up. Taking responsibility is not a position so many enjoy. So if one in a crowd calls out for it, everyone else is happy to dump as quickly as they can. When they load the responsibilities on you, smile and then bill them. Dollar Dance Concept 8. As you trump through, heading toward your final liberation, you will have to agree to take responsibility for things, including, of course, yourself. There are a few wealthy people who do not accept responsibility naturally. The next key to abundance thinking that we ought to consider is commitment. This quality goes hand in hand with responsibility. Often you will find that creative people have a reluctance to commit or to join. They feel that if they do so, their creativity will be hamstrung, so they never get into the marketplace of life properly. Later in this book, we will discuss the number one key to success, which I call concerted action in the marketplace. Concerted action in the marketplace. Suffice it to say that if you want to get ahead in life or just make a little bit more, you will have to first commit to that in your thinking. In other words, it has to become important to you. It is pointless to say that you want a little more and you do not feel too secure about whether you want it or not. If you want more, you will have to commit energy to that idea. Energy you will swap for cash. That often means that the hustle and bustle of the marketplace will call on you to get it a little deeper than you currently are. It may mean more work or more responsibility, as discussed, or just more concentration on what it is that you are doing. But all of that begins with with the mental idea you will commit to the goal. Often you will hear people bemoan their financial state, and in the very same breath, they will tell you that they are not interested in money. It is true that many people are genuinely not interested in becoming wealthy, and I don't have a problem with that. Many are happy to muddle along, provided they have plenty of time off for fishing or whatever. But if you had decided you want more, then you will have to energize the idea. To just say, I would like to win the lottery, doesn't usually work, for the level of energy and enthusiasm at which that thought is conceived says by its very nature that you are prepared to do little or nothing to advance your financial status. Now, if you were to say, I want more, I am committed and dedicated to having more, I will increase my energy and my output by 50%, and I will also buy some lottery tickets, then suddenly you'll have a plan that will work. By now, you have developed a higher consciousness and gone beyond the mindless rhythm of TikTok. But it is important to remember that in order for you to translate that higher consciousness into cash, you will most likely have to return to the land of TikTok in order to sell what you have. As you re enter, you will have to respect the normal workings of things. You will have to play the game and follow the rules. If you don't, then you will alienate the very people who are just on the verge of transferring their cash to you. And whereas you may, in your mind, be coming from a totally different perspective, you will have to play along in order to not sabotage your plans. So, as a part of your commitment, you will have to agree to join the system, if only for a limited period. It's hard to get into the big money without joining. Not impossible, but hard. Let us say you are a good rock and roll singer and you're doing little gigs for a few hundred a night. To get into the real money, you'll need a recording contract. That means that someone somewhere will have to lay out a bunch of cash in order to back you to make records. The best move is a large record company rather than a little one. As you walk in the door, you'll be faced with a corporation, accountants, lawyers, sales managers, PR people, and so on. You'll have to play along. Even though your creativity may cause you to feel that you don't belong, at the point you'd better commit to joining. If your energy is too abrasive or too depreciating or too deprecating of the system, the record company backs off. They don't want to lay out several hundred thousands to get into an emotional financial zoo. Often, creative people, because of their talent, tend to feel they don't belong, so they become terrorists. They terrorize and destroy at every turn. Then, as they try to market their creativity, they are faced with people's negative reactions. They find that at every time they are on the verge of big money, something happens to spin them out. The point to remember is that to get beyond life, you have to join. And as you join, you have to be careful to respect the thought forms or dimensions of those who will assist you in your final liberation. That means disciplining yourself so that you can be in the system long enough to collect. Of course, there are all sorts of places in mega abundance that are totally outside the system, but much of the fringe is illegal. Of those activities that are honest, you'll find that because they are fringe areas, the amount of money there is sometimes limited. One thing you may find as you approach the big money is that sitting there on the pot are a lot of characters who have been there a long time. They are usually older in years, conservative, and set in their ways. To get them on your side, you have to be committed to yourself and your ideas. Otherwise, they get jumpy and you have to be committed to them. Making them wrong to their face just because they hold the reins is a fatal mistake. As you climb from, let's say, 100,000 to 300,000, you can more or less do as you like. But the ascent from there to 1 million and beyond, you will have to play the game. If you go out and borrow, say 5,000, and no one cares if you are loony or not, provided they are fairly sure of getting their 5,000 back. But as you approach the $1 million league, the potential to loss is backing you. The potential to loss and backing you is enormous. Plus, the kind of people you will be dealing with will, by the very nature of their position on the pot, be very rich. Now, most people think that the rich lived a relaxed, indolent life with few cares or concerns. This is far from the case. The more money you have, the more the rest of the world will be sniping at you, trying to get it from you. One of the complaints you hear from the wealthy is that they feel oppressed by the fact that everybody wants something from them. So as you approach, you had better give the impression of being committed and stable. Otherwise, you'll be faced with a lot of rejection. In passing and nothing to do with commitment, let me offer you a couple of good tips on how to deal with people who are very wealthy. Given that the wealthy are constantly under some kind of pressure in that everyone wants something from them, the way to approach them is to genuinely not want anything at all other than their company. As they get to know you, they will trust you. And in fact, they don't want anything. Uh, and in fact, the fact that they don't want anything will make you refreshingly different. If it is possible that they may offer you their advice or their support, but when they do, it will be their idea, not yours. That allows you to come from strength and it allows them to feel more relaxed in your presence. The other thing you'll find helpful is that many wealthy people become so because they felt a need to have an impact in the world. They sought acceptance and a greater meaning to life. So they embarked on a course of action that made them rich. What they discovered, often to their charging, is that all the money in the world will not win them one iota of acceptance if they don't accept themselves. What they want is for you to relate to them as real people, not as a $50 million bank balance. Further, they don't need fawning followers who are energy draining. They need genuine friends who give them energy, acknowledgement, encouragement, and who are fun to be with. No matter how little money you have, when in the company of the very wealthy, come off as being equal to them. Treat them as equals with respect, and they will ignore what you have and what you don't have. They will treat you as equal also. At that point, you will have declared yourself in, and they will have won a genuine friend. Personally, I find the company of those of my mates who are very rich a lot of fun, for all of them are real characters who have done things in life. They are interesting and I enjoy learning from them. When you are genuinely not focused on their money, they relax and let you into their scene. The main benefit of being in their company is that it allows you to create a feeling and understanding that that what they are is not at all different from who you are. And if they went out and made 50 million in 2 years, so can you. Further, these characters are usually in the thick of things. And just by being there with them, a certain energy rubs off. So, whereas they may not be prepared to write you a check over dinner, if you stay awake, you don't need it anyway. For during the coffee and the port, the conversation drifts to the performance of ABC Finance Incorporated, and the major shareholder who is sitting across from you, twiddling his coffee spoon, happens to mention that ABC is about to quadruple its profits, double its dividend, and announce a 2-for-1 stock split. Bingo. So much of abundance thinking is setting yourself up in your mind so to be in the right place at the right time with the right information. Nothing more for making money has very little to do with hard work. Well, hard work is one way, but there's a lot of simpler ways. As you crank up how you think of yourself in relation to money, you will begin to watch those areas where the abundance lies, and you will get used to reading the energy of situations and placing yourself there slightly ahead of the pack. That allows you instant reward. In conclusion, thinking abundantly is just a habit. And as you expand the circle of possibilities that you allow yourself, bit by bit, the universe responds. The reason why abundance thinking is the vital first step is that it is from the collective energy of those thought forms that you create an overall feeling within you. And it is that feeling, namely, that abundance is natural to you. which pulls you to the opportunities you need in life. Where the moolah is, someone waits for me. Chapter 6: Feeling Rich and Loving It. I have always found that the metaphysical approach to life and to making money is the most empowering way to go. Perhaps you agree with me, or perhaps you have another system that works just as well, if not better. My point is not to try to convince you that my approach is right, but merely to have you look to see if the metaphysical approach offers you some additional benefit or insight into life. But whatever your opinion, one thing is fact: the events of your life are created by you, and those events come to you through your feelings, meaning that the events you experience will be exactly congruent with the sum total of whatever feelings you sustain and put out. People who have worked upon themselves, who have truly looked within their hearts, are aware in intimate detail of every aspect of their feelings. They know who they are, and they constantly review how they feel about things so that they might learn more about the nature of reality and the way to control it. Unconscious people tend to negate their feelings and look instead outwards into reality for a meaning to life. They will hold, say, negative feelings about Black people, and those feelings will be with them for years because that opinion becomes a permanent part of their feelings. And all positive experiences of Black people will be ignored, and all negative ones will be heightened and remembered. Then one day they are stopped at the traffic light in their brand new Mercedes when a Black lady in a pickup truck rams them in the back end and fires their Merc into the side of the laundromat. Logically, they can't understand why it happened, and they will say, I had a very unlucky day today. I was innocently stopped at a light, and this totally out of control, irresponsible Black lady rammed me into the laundromat. It took 12 firemen 3 hours to cut me out of the spin dryer. Of course, the pickup driver has a completely different view of events. She says, I woke up this morning with a feeling that I ought to do more to serve my local community. So I decided to take a day off from running my international cosmetics empire and drive downtown to see what's happening in town. As I walked into my 6 car garage, I had this intuitive feeling not to take my Cadillac convertible. Instead, I chose the old pickup, the one with the cast iron front fender. I don't know why I chose that. It just seemed the right decision at the time. As I was cruising down Main Street, I came upon a fellow in a Mercedes whose feelings needed concrete proof that Black people are weirdos. So I rammed him into the laundromat as part of my affirmation of wanting to serve humanity. I could have shoved him into the bus stop, but I thought that the laundromat would be a more symbolic of his need to clean up his act. My desire to help having been satisfied, I went home and sat in the garden, thinking how wonderful life is. As we engage our intellect in trying to understand life, we are confronted with all sorts of events that defy logical explanations. Yet, isn't it strange that, in spite of these constant reminders that life is not always logical, we still have millions of people who insist that it ought to be? You would think that once they had been faced with, say, a dozen illogical situations, they finally give up and accept that there are patterns to life that defy logic. But no, they hold to their rigid intellectual approach, hoping that perhaps the problem of not understanding will be solved at a later date. In finances, especially, you can see all sorts of patterns that intellectually make no sense. Yet everything happens for a reason. So, whereas the explanation of things may not seem obvious to the intellect, it may lay there as clear as day to the feelings or the intuition. If you look at the successful people whom you know, often you can put your finger on why they are doing so well. It will seem that to you that they are not the clever or even the talented. Somehow, whatever they turn their hand to becomes gold. Everywhere they go, people respond to them like magic. Of course, the answer lies not so much in what those do as in the way they feel. By being sure of themselves, being powerful and positive, and allowing little to distract them, they dedicate themselves to what is, to, to what is real, to that which grants them pleasure and benefits their quest. Their life is empowered through their concentrating on it, and that concentration comes out as enthusiasm, charisma, a genuine joie de doing it. Bit by bit, their feelings begin to correspond to all those positive traits. Eventually, their quest naturally exudes success, so much so that they are not consciously aware that they are doing it. They just get up each day and feel alive. Well, part of all things. Then the telephone rings and another win is tossed in the bag. It is no surprise to them for they expect it. They understand their world and live in it as a dominant force. As such, they naturally expect things to flow their way. They use their intuition to avoid situations and people who would adversely affect that flow. Dollar Dance Concept 9. You have a divine right to choose whom you will play with and under what circumstances. By eliminating any energy drag, the positive things in your life will resonate faster and faster. The reason why money is so spiritually important to those of you on the quest is that it gives you instant quantifiable feedback as to where your energy actually is at this moment. That is why so many of the so called spiritual folk are so phony. In pretending to hate the idea of money, living as they do away from it and negating it whenever possible, they can be more easily kid themselves at achieving living sainthood. You can see the dichotomy between that which the mind believes and that which is very real clearly in relation to money trips. It is easy for one's intellect to be diametrically opposed to one's inner feeling. That is why people think in terms of becoming abundant and years later are still potless. To achieve maturity as a person and make your money harvesting fruitful activities, you have to be aware of your feelings. And those feelings have to have wealth firmly embossed on them. Otherwise, your money making efforts are constantly hampered by what you actually believe in the inner you. That is why I say the trick to money is having some. For once you have a little wealth, that of itself becomes an affirmation of your success. And further, having a few bob allows you to pull out of any negative emotion around finances. If you don't have any money, it's still a simple process to create your feelings and acknowledgement that what you have is abundance and that the world is, in fact, an abundant place to be. As you begin to affirm having rather than not having, bit by bit, your feelings pull you into places where having is natural, and suddenly you get it, not just in your consciousness, but also literally. Returning for a moment to the ESP of money, you can see how, as you change your feelings, free money or easy money becomes a natural part of your expectancy. In reading the energy of people and circumstances, it is simple for you to shun the hard stuff and accentuate the simple deals. To get used to the using your feelings, try this exercise. Write down the names of all the major players in your life. Then, in a meditative state, imagine yourself touching them with your hand in the area of the heart. That connects you. Then feel within your own heart what energy they give off. First, your impression is usually correct. The inner you knows. It cannot lie. Keep it simple. Decide solely whether their energy brings you up or brings you down. Write your conclusion by their name. Next, write down as titles all the major moves you are currently making in the area of finances. Visualize them in your mind's eye and extend your hand in the middle of the events. If there are people involved, touch them. Again, write down up or down, then look at your list and give yourself 60 days to get rid of all the downs. Invite all the ups to lunch within the next month. You have a divine right to choose whom you play with and under what circumstances. By eliminating any drag energy, the positive things in your life resonate faster and faster. It is easier to destroy than to create. So one down is not equal to one up. It tends to cancel the up and leave you with nothing. By discarding the downs, the ups are left freestanding, solid as rocks all around you. Of course, developing that solid, resonating feeling of wealth means that you will have to go beyond fear around money. For any sustained fear that is held in your feelings for any length of time will quickly unravel any positive benefits you have created through your affirmations of wealth. It's a catch 22, really, for somehow you have to go beyond the uncertainties while you are still uncertain. Again, whatever lack or uncertainty has been there will only be a matter of your opinion. How much effort it takes for you to change that opinion is up to you and will depend on circumstances, your upbringing, and 101 other things. But once you see that wealth is only an opinion that all wealthy people hold, then it's simple for you to incorporate the same first in your thinking and then in your feelings. Once you have joined in your feeling, it is easy to see what separates the winners from the others. Now, as you begin to change how you feel, you will have to watch each and every move carefully. At the beginning, you may tend to overanalyze your life, But that is not a mistake. For in looking at every minute detail, you will compensate for the fact that perhaps in the past you looked at a little or none of it. Once you have a good, solid grip on who you are and what you believe, then change becomes gradual, pleasing process where each advance generates momentum for the next. The symbology of how you feel about abundance lies all around. If you look at the quality of your lifestyle, you can soon see whether or not you believe in abundance. I don't mean how rich you are. What I mean is, do the things around you have quality and creativity, or are they drab, ugly, and dead? You can live in one room in the back end town and still be surrounded by abundance. Looking for the way things feel shows who you are. Also, it shows you quite dramatically whether or not you invest in yourself. This is vital, for it says, I believe in myself. I will spend to better myself. If you don't, others pick up on that. And that in itself devalues what you are in their minds. Further, it is hard to ask others for their backing and support if you won't back yourself. The point about feeling is that every part of your life has to be congruent with whatever it is you wish to become. You can't expect abundance to find you if you are surrounded by the symbols of lack. For every rusty bathtub in the yard says, no abundance here, please. It is better, therefore, that you surround yourself with a few good quality things than pile your life up with junk. I don't mean that you can't take advantage of a bargain if offered, but concerning only on the cheap and shoddy allows you to rest only in that. One good pair of expensive shoes is better than a dozen pairs made underwater by Brazilian convicts at $2 each. If you don't have wealth at present, then you will have to adopt an air that says you are in the state of becoming more wealthy, moving up. I don't mean for you to spend a whole lot of money you don't have, lining your toaster with mink or whatever, but rather that you should begin to seek and enjoy the quality things of life, many of which cost little or nothing. You can't go to the most expensive hotel in town and just sit there and watch the hot shots trot back and forth. It won't cost you a penny. If the waiter bugs you, offer a coffee and drink it slowly. When after 3 hours he asks if you'll have another, reply, no thanks. I like to drink slowly. Anyway, I'm trying to give up caffeine. It's interesting to me that quality items often don't cost very much anymore than the tacky stuff, especially when you factor in that they last longer and give off a good feeling that enhances who you are. Yet, so often the upmarket commodities tend to put us off, for we don't immediately see what it is that we get for our money. This is because we are not taught to acknowledge things' intrinsic energy as a part of its value. This is because we are not taught to acknowledge a thing's intrinsic energy as a part of its value. Or sometimes we fear what will be lumbered with a bill we can't afford. Let me give you an example. At most airports in the US, there are ranks of yellow cabs that will take you downtown for 30 to 40 bucks, depending on the distance. The drivers are usually dead, sleazy, extremely negative, and the cabs feel on an energy level like a mortuary on a hot day with the refrigeration turned off. Also, at most airports, there is a stretch limo service. Now, most would never think of calling from a chauffeured limousine because they presume that it costs a fortune. The fact is that often it doesn't cost much more than a regular cab. For example, at the Dallas Fort Worth airport, a cab downtown these days will cost you around $30, while a limo costs 35. You might as well lay out the extra $5, ride in style, and arrive feeling good in the care of your driver, who respects and looks after you. Then commit your life to some sleazebag who will hurtle you across town in a tin can and insult you free of charge. Funny thing about the yellow cab system, for years I was convinced that it was a halfway house used to rehabilitate mutants. Of course, not all urban cabbies are revolting, but many are. So why are the crapshoot? Why enter the crapshoot? As you seek out excellence and quality, you naturally change the feelings around you. It is as if by acknowledging beauty, your life becomes more beautiful. To achieve this, you might have to move up market a bit, for it is too much a stretch of the imaginations to see constant beauty in a dump. But as you raise your energy and polish up your act, every aspect of what you are gives off a telltale sign, and people notice that either consciously or subconsciously. As you move up in your feelings, you will feel better about yourself and you'll be able to charge more. That of itself is an affirmation of how you feel. And sooner or later, you'll be dealing only with a better class of customer. You'll do less work for more money. Now, put this book down for a moment and agree with yourself to double your prices. Once you're happy with that, take a moment to acknowledge that abundance is just a thought form and that you have just incorporated a really nice money making idea into your consciousness. Things are on the up and up. If you are not happy with doubling your prices, then tack 20 or 30% on and see how that feels. The first reaction for some will be fear, for they feel that if they put their prices up, they'll be out of a job or their product or their service will be rejected. That is a natural reaction. And if you're coming from the same energy as before, it's a possibility. The way to make the price doubling affirmation work is to begin to put more and more energy or value into whatever it is you are doing, then double your prices. Whatever you're selling, whether it be your labor, expertise, product, or service, you can make it better. I'm sure that if we look carefully at what you do, we could probably see aspects that are negative or lifeless and other parts that are less than excellent. There are bound to be things that can be improved. Further, almost everything one sees in the marketplace of life is dull and boring. You can use your inventive mind to imbue your efforts with creativity in life. When you invest enthusiasm in your creativity and make things stimulating and unusual, people respond, for the public knows that 99% of things out there are dull and no real fun. When they discover a singing plumber, it's a joy and delight to them. Imagine that you have a plumbing service. Your van is immaculate. All your tools are polished. Your uniform is starched and spotless. Imagine that you always arrive on time or even 10 minutes early. Imagine that you actually know what you're doing, that you work as fast and steady pace, and that you complete the jobs on time. And let us say that you are available to fix leaks at any hour of the day or night, and that you work and you sing arias from La Traviata. Imagine that the singing is beautiful and inspires people. Imagine that you really consider the client's needs and are positive, helpful, informative, and polite. What if your service had a portable phone so that whenever a customer calls, you could answer their inquiry immediately? Now, if the other plumbers charge $30 an hour, wouldn't people pay more for your service? You can be damn sure they would. Your service is unusual and cheap. A ticket to the opera is $45. It's worth it to the customers to pay a little extra, not to have to go through the hassle and emotion of hiring the regular service and having them not show up. Plus, if they don't like La Traviata, you have 100 tunes from the greatest musicals of all time up your sleeve. What would you like, madam? Oklahoma, The Sound of Music, Cats, Evita, you name it, I'll sing it. On top of that, the water level in the front room will be down 2 feet in 3 minutes. Leave it to me. You go to the hairdressers. I'll call you when I'm finished. It is all so simple. It's only a feeling. The feeling is empowered by your concentrating on your work. If you have the talent, use it, make it special, and your plumbing service will be inundated with customers. You see, you can do what you want in life as long as you are different. Once you come from an energy that is unusual, people don't quantify your efforts so much in terms of money. This is because they have nothing with which to compare to you. Also, they can't quantify it or price what you are worth to them because most of your worth is a feeling. And that feeling generates in people a positive emotional response that lies outside the marketplace. And its value is whatever anyone thinks it's worth. Let me give you one more example. There is a dry cleaning store in London whose motto is, "We clean to a standard, not to a price." When you go into their shop, it's like no other dry cleaning shop you've ever seen. There is no counter, no rows of smelly chemical clothes on wire hangers, cash register, no tacky ads on the wall offering invisible mending. In fact, it looks like a very elegant front room. There are fine chairs and polished tables with the latest fashion magazines, flowers, paintings, and quality carpets. You sit down with a smelly old shirt in your hand, and a fellow comes out all dressed up in a formal suit and asks you if the shirt has any special requirements. Then he hauls your laundry out to the back and gives you a receipt. You can imagine their prices. But what you get is immaculate service, and everything in the store resonates and affirms quality and care. You know that your shirt is special to them and that you are special. They make you feel like it's an honor for them to become custodians of your grubby gear for a day or two. Is the store successful? Of course, it's packed. I'm sure that by now you are picking up on the excitement of feeling good about yourself and translating that into abundance feelings that will resonate from deep within you to create more lush and harmonious lifestyle. As you begin to see the abundance of the world inside your heart, that recognition and alignment allows for an expansion of what you are, not only in cash flow terms, but also in spiritual terms. For as you accept that the supply of goodness is limitless, you begin to see yourself in limitless terms. Your overview moves gradually from little and finite to massive and infinite. It is as if you were let go of the emotion that surrounds your life, then life itself moves inside your heart rather than events seeming to exist outside of you. It is as if you are becoming bigger than life rather than living in the feeling that life is outside of you and that you are at the mercy of circumstances. The first step to internalizing reality is, of course, to take absolute responsibility for yourself and for the events of your life. Doing so, you enter an intimate relationship with the symbology of your life, and you are able to identify how that symbology relates to some inner feeling you hold. For example, if you feel infinite and a part of things, and you watch a bird fly, and that bird flies in your heart, you can feel it. Every subtle shift of its wings has an impact on you. You become the bird, and it is you. Once that feeling of being larger than life has settled into your heart, your insecurities melt. Both of those aspects move hand in hand, being interrelated. At first, it's hard for you to see yourself larger than life, for we were brought up to allow the world to tow us by the nose. Our children are taught that they are victims of fate. However, the more you expand that feeling of infinity within, the more you go beyond fate. Then feeling yourself to be infinite, the world shrinks and you can dominate your life. 20 years ago, a friend gave me a gift of a small model of the world set inside an onyx cube. For a while, I carried it with me everywhere I went. I will never forget it. It helped me remember that the world is really very small and that life is on that little world. To be larger than that image was not hard. When next you meditate, see the planet Earth in the palm of your hand. Imagine all the people in that little Earth. Then take the image and place it in your heart. Enliven it by seeing an orbit around the sun. Before long, the world and its events shrink to their real size, and you expand to fill out the infinity that you really are. Eventually, you reach the point where you know that everything is in flow and that what you are is perfect. Even though you may have imperfections, you understand that by being in tune with the flow of life, you will always be in the right place at the right time. Your quality of life is guaranteed by the very fact that you can accept things as they come and that you feel in control. So your life manifests that control effortlessly and naturally. As a final point to abundance and feelings, let us look for a moment to the feelings of holding on and letting go. This may enter into the realm of pure metaphysics, but is vital understanding, especially as you become more and more sophisticated in the way you wield your consciousness in order to materialize the things you want. In the Force, I wrote that if someone asks you for something, you shouldn't give it to them. Perhaps I should have qualified that, for it caused a certain amount of confusion. The concepts run like this: if you truly feel that you are a part of all things and that life is inside of you rather than outside of you, then all of abundance of the world becomes yours in feeling, although it may not all be available to you right now as fact. Thus, being able to feel that you are everything and that everything is you allows you an attitude of infinite possibility so that you can receive limitless quantities from anywhere at any time. To enter into that kind of receiving, you have to adopt an attitude that is flowing, not binding, in relation to things that you do own. Meaning, whereas you have certain possessions that are useful and pleasing to you, if you surround those possessions with an emotion of holding on, it cuts you off from the world, from the flow excuse me, it cuts you off from the flow and the unrestrained feeling that says abundance is everywhere and things come to me naturally and effortlessly. The idea of releasing and not holding on does not mean that in releasing you have to become imbalanced. For example, if you have 2000 in the bank and you have commitments for that same amount in the next week and someone asks you for money, you don't have to give it to them. There is no need for you to become imbalanced in the flow, for that to be very imbalanced would throw you out of the flow. All the possessions you have are basically on rental from the God force. They will all be released eventually, either because you die and because no further need for them, or because you use them up or dispose them to another. Many of those items form a part of your needs, and to give them away could cause a problem. For example, if someone admires your trousers, does that mean you have to release them on the spot and go home on the bus in your undies? No, that may cause you a certain imbalance. But if you have 60 pairs of trousers in your closet and someone asks you for a pair, give them one. For in that moment in time, that pair of trousers does not fall into the category of an intimate need. And coming as you do from not holding on, you can release that item of clothing as a part of an affirmation that says that the abundance of the God force will provide me with another pair should I ever have that need. The point is, be careful that you do not invest what you do have with an emotion that emanates the limited feeling of, this is all there is, and I had better hold on to this stuff like grim death. For others feel that, and it is hard to expect them to release their wealth liberally to you if you don't hold that same attitude. If you see the supply as infinite, then your emotions are balanced, for you know that there will always be more up ahead. Thus, in receiving and giving, you are free. You can receive without emotion, and you can give in the same way. What is spiritual abundance? It cannot just be mailing a check to the Ethiopians. It's more. It is the point of mature consciousness whereby you see value and worth in all things. There is spiritual rivulet of energy that defines all things. And because it flows through reality, it underpins it and grants it worth. For you to align that understanding and live it, trusting in it is spiritual abundance, in my view. To elevate your consciousness and to practice the feeling of flowing abundance, try for a while anyway, not saying thank you when people give you things. Just take it and accept it, as a tiger would take its lunch in the forest without so much as a, if you please, and would you mind? The idea is to see the coming and going of things as natural and unemotional. You expected it. Then, when you give yourself or your possessions, you should also not expect anything in return. Just give and move on. Thus, a balance develops both in your receiving and in your giving. The less resistance you create, the more flow. That, of course, is the key to life. In dropping your resistance, you may seem to first be more vulnerable, yet eventually that lack of resistance will put you in the flow. Thus, by holding on to nothing, you get everything. So much for thinking and feeling. Let us turn our attention to action, without which your consciousness remains much like two skeletons making love in a biscuit tin, all rattle and wind and no substance. To the marketplace, let us hap upon the affairs of man and declare ourselves in.